This morning we're starting our new series, Family Vacation, and I hope all of us have some fond memories of family vacations. We didn't go on a ton as a kid sometimes, like we went on plenty, but we didn't go on a ton of big vacations because my parents own their own business, and if you've ever owned your own business, you know it kind of takes a lot of time. And so it makes it difficult to travel. But when you go on these vacations, it's a time that you can spend with, your kids, with your parents, with your siblings, with everybody. And I think a lot of times we use it and it's a really exciting time, and we spend it together, and we spend all this time together. But it's really about a focus of 1 week together, and we're trying sometimes just to make up for the other weeks where we've not been there, or we've been gone, or we've not been mentally present even, and we try to make up for it in that 1 week. So part of it, of where we're going to be talking from today, is how to bring that 1 week into the rest of the year. It doesn't mean that we need to travel more, unless you really want to, then I guess you can't, but that's not the main purpose, but it's more about the time and the commitment and just being able to really focus on each other and not just on these specific things. If I can talk this morning. I think that one thing that we have to understand is that our relationships that we have with our family are also going to affect our relationships that we have with God, and likewise. The example that we've seen, the family bond itself was created by God. So He made us together and made us as a unity, and to unify and come together and to show our love to kids, to our parents, to those that we're closest to, for that to be a witness to those that are around us. I remember my favorite vacation as a kid. My parents just sold their company. So we were taking a big vacation because we didn't take one the entire time before they sold the company. And I think I was probably, 7 or 8 years old. And we left from Seymour, about an hour from here, Seymour. We left from there and we went to Florida. And we stopped on the way, we went to Florida, and we went down to Key West. And we went from Key West up to North Carolina and stopped in Tennessee and Memphis and made our way gradually back. And we were gone for a couple weeks. We drive a lot on our vacations. I don't know about you guys, but we weren't I never flew on an airplane until I was 16 or 17, and it wasn't with my parents. That was a school trip. So we weren't, big on doing a lot of that stuff. So we drove, and if you ever spent hours upon hours upon hours in the car with your siblings, or your parents, or even your kids, it kind of wears on you a little bit at times. And this is before we had iPods and MP3 players and stuff, so I remember I'm pretty sure I had a tape player with me. It wasn't even a CD player. Tapes are these things, and they have film on it, and it produced sound when you would play them. So if you're not familiar with that, that's what that kind of is. And a lot of times they get tangled up, and you use a pencil, and yeah. So I remember that. I'm the youngest, 2 older sisters, so naturally I got the seat selection. I ended up in the very back of the van by myself, and my sisters laying their seats on me, natural. So kind of squeezed in the back, and the luggage was all around us because you're on a 2-week vacation. So I remember that all the little fun things we did. I remember my sisters getting mad. I remember, yelling, and if you guys don't stop yelling, I'm going to stop this car, and stuff like that. Maybe you've never said that, I don't know, but I know I've heard it. and I'll probably say it when we have kids too. But the time that we spent together, it still sticks in my mind because it was one of the first vacations we had. We didn't do, we didn't go to another country and do these things that everyone feels like. I think when we go on vacations, we have to do this big, exciting trip and do something really crazy. And we didn't, we drove a long time, and we went to several beaches, and, it was the first time I ever went to a beach. First time I saw the ocean. Key West, if you've never been there, is just kind of crazy when you're there. It's we're driving across the bridge that is, I want to say it's 7 miles long. You're driving across the bridge over the ocean. And it's just kind of and then there's an old bridge that was next to us, and you can see there was holes in it, I guess, where they had blown it up. Now we're driving across there, and I'm asking my parents, what happened to that bridge? That's not going to happen here, right? But that sticks in my memory, and it's because we spent so much time together. We went to an aquarium, there were sharks, and and I remember we're standing on the bay in Key West, and we're walking out, and we're talking about the water's so clear, we're just going to jump in the water and swim right there. Then a shark swam underneath the thing we're standing on. It's like, well, my dad, of course, he's like, there's a baby shark, there's a mama shark around here somewhere, so I'm not getting in the water. So we didn't go swimming there. Just going to say that. But I remember those things. So hopefully you guys had some vacations that way. But where we go from here is where our main purpose, our focus of it today will be that what you do influences your family. What you do could impact your family forever. You hold influence there. The way you act, the way you react. That 1-2 week out of the year, out of the years, still stands out to me because it was probably probably was our longest vacation. And it was one that we spent the most time together, and probably one of the few we went where it was me and my sisters, because if I was 7 or 8, my oldest sister was 13, 14, somewhere in there. So, she didn't want to go on a whole lot of stuff after that with us. She was too cool for the rest of the family. So God can use our families to allow others to come to Him. He can use our families to be the greatest point of influence that we have. He can use our families to sometimes change the way that we act as adults. Now, any of you ever said, after your mom or your dad said something, I will never say that? Anyone ever said that before? Some people? How many of you said something that your parents used to say and you want to slap yourself for it? You ever done that? Yeah, I have those moments. I remember I was talking to my dad on the phone a few weeks ago, and I told him, I did this, and it's I couldn't help but feel like I'm turning into my father. Just say those things, and it's I already know when we have kids, I'll probably be even more like him and catch myself saying some of the things that he did. So what he did taught me. But on the same aspect for my dad, he didn't really know his biological father. He didn't have a stepdad till he was a teenager. So for him, my dad's goal in being a dad was to be completely different than anything he had experienced. He didn't know what it was supposed to be like to have kids. How's a dad supposed to act? How's a dad supposed to look? All of these things, but his purpose was, I don't want to be like what I had. I want to be something different. And that impacts me and how I'll raise our kids, and how I raise our kids will impact how they raise their kids, and it goes on and on. Whether it's the same way or whether it's the complete opposite, there's still an impact there. And I think sometimes we'd be surprised by how we talk, how we act, and what we do affects those around us, especially our families. The key scripture we're looking at today is 2 parts. It's going to be Genesis 18, 17 through 19, just a few scriptures there. And then it's also going to be Acts 3, 24 through 26. The first one in Genesis is where God and angels come and talk to Abraham. This is when he finds out he's going to have a kid. Basically, you're going to. And they kind of laugh because, I'm old. We're not going to be able to have kids. That's 100 years old. I don't know anyone that wants to be 100 years old and having an infant. That sounds like a lot of work. And you can only imagine being told this. But because of who Abraham was, God made a promise to him. And then the question arises, because this is also before they go to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And you'll see should I hide this from him? Should I tell him? Should we tell him? And that's part of what we're looking at. And we can see the promise that God made to Abraham at that time of what his kids would become, his heirs, his descendants. And then Acts, it's looking back at the same thing from the prophets and also looking to his future successors, his descendants. So we'll go ahead and we'll start in Genesis 18, 17. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed." He doesn't have a single kid at this point. I just want to point that out. No kids. He's old. According to him, he's old. Has no kids. And guys, he will surely become a great and mighty nation. So, sometimes we have to be willing to be patient to see God's promises come through, because he'll never experience his family having any more than one heir. Like that will be his greatest experience. We have one son. And it doesn't really just pick up steam after that either. It takes a little bit of time for them to get to 12 descendants. It's a few generations down. It's many years later. Continuing in verse 19. For I have chosen him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. He may command his children and his household. That's important to understand. The visitors, of course, as I referenced, it's God and the angels coming before him. They repeat his blessing. The promise is actually the first time. It's in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. So that's where we can see it. And you see where the word chosen, we have chosen him. That's right there in verse 19. The Hebrew word used there is yada. And I've actually preached an entire sermon about yada, 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 many years ago. But it's often used to refer to acknowledging something. It's knowledge. I referenced that. I understand yada. It's not the way we use it. It's knowing something or understanding something. The idea seems to be that Yahweh, God, knows Abraham. So there's the knowledge there. So that's what we have to understand here is God saying, we know Abraham. Should we hide this from him, that what we're about to do? If you don't understand, or if you don't know the story, or you don't remember the story, because it's been a little while, his nearest relative, his nephew basically, is living in Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's probably part of why they're having this conversation. This is what he feels like is his only heir right now, is this son, his nephew, which he obviously raised like a son because he followed him and left country with him and went to this unknown place. So that's where this part is. And God says, should we hide this from him? He's my chosen one. I know him. And that'll be the important part. Then if we go ahead and we look at Acts 3:24 through 26, and 24 says, and likewise all the prophets who have spoken from Samuel and his successors onward also announced these days. That's talking about the future days, the days of Jesus. It is you who are the sons of the prophets and of the covenant, the promise, which God made with your fathers, saying to Abraham, in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. For you first God raised up his servant and sent him to bless you by turning every one of you from your wicked ways. The key one in this set of verses, you can see that it's Abraham and your seed and all the families of the earth shall be blessed. That was God's promise, and that was part of what we saw there in Genesis. And then for you first, God raised up his servant. If you notice, his servant is capitalized. That is actually the direct relation to Jesus. The suffering servant, the one who would die and who would come, that would be a descendant of Abraham. So the one that would bring us, would bless us and turn all of us from our wicked ways was the immediate descendant of Abraham. And if you've ever read, and I don't know if anyone like to read genealogies in the Bible? You're like, so-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so, and it's really hard to read. I don't understand it necessarily the greatest. I think if you spent a lot of time studying it, you could. But if you look through the genealogy that's presented, you can see where Jesus is brought all the way back and who the lines were. And if you really pay attention to some of the names there, you're kind of amazed that this person is in the line of Jesus. So it's kind of crazy, but that's how Abraham's family would bless all the nations. It took thousands of years to see this promise fulfilled. So one thing that we can say before I move into it is that God does not have a short-sighted plan for any of us or for what we do. For our descendants, for our family. He's not just like, this is it. He doesn't just look at tomorrow. He doesn't look at next week or just look at our past. Because, if you look at Abraham and some of the things his sons and grandsons and great-grandsons did, you'd be like, why didn't he just wipe them out? Like, they lied, they deceived, they killed, they destroyed things. Why did they not just do that? but he had a promise, and he had a long plan, knowing the things that would happen, the good and the bad. So we can understand that. The first thing that we have to understand with these scriptures is where Abraham is. Abraham is in the greatest position of influence. His greatest influence he will ever have will be on his own family, his own offspring, his own heirs. If you don't think that's true, why do you say things that your parents used to say that you never liked? Do as I do, not as I say. I'll give you something to cry about. Anyone, heard those? That was when I heard a lot. I was a pouter as a kid. Stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. These things come to us, but if our parents aren't a great position of influence to us, then why does everything they do impact who we become? Whether it's to become like them or become the opposite of them, we catch ourselves there. So the thing that we have to understand is that this is our greatest influence in our life, is the one that we have on our kids, grandkids, relatives, siblings. All the people immediately around us will be the ones that we can be the greatest witness to, because who knows you better than the people that live with you? Right? If you do stupid stuff throughout the week, your kids know probably, right? That's how that works. It's the same, if you're a parent and your kids are doing stupid stuff, you're kind of like, yeah, it's not hidden from me. Kids think they're really great at hiding stuff from their parents typically. And 90% of the time, the stuff I thought I was hiding from my parents, so yeah, we knew, we were just waiting for you to tell us. Yeah, you weren't hiding. You're not that sneaky. You're not that good. But basically, is what they're telling you. But our greatest position of influence is there. Genesis 18 calls fathers to direct their children to keep the way of the Lord. That's part of the father's job. That's part of the mother's job, is to direct their children in the way of the Lord. Interesting statistic I read this week that points to this is that if you don't know this, and you may already know this, but in churches, the membership roll is usually higher for women than men. And this is today's day and age, it's usually higher for women than men. But also, there is a greater chance for women to become Christians before their husbands or boyfriends or spouses. Statistically shown through research that is the case. So I just want to say, when I say father, it doesn't mean that only the dad can do this. Jesus was very, very pointed to be inclusive to men and women both throughout his ministry. I believe that's important to be known. Being a parent means working in God's behalf to provide direction for your children. Directors aren't friends usually. Directors are in charge. This is this. Me and my dad talk a few times a week. We're friends. He's one of my best friends. I would still say that, even though he lives 800 miles away. But here's the thing that I know. When I was a kid, I was growing up, I knew that my dad enjoyed the things that I did, or would be there with me, would help in any way. I also knew he was in charge. I still believe that I'm afraid of no man but one, and that's my dad. I won't mess with him. Anybody else? Okay. I don't care how big you are, how strong you are, whatever. I won't be deterred, but I won't mess with my dad. That's a line I will not cross. But directors are in charge. They're not meant to be the friend and be just do things how you want to do it and it'll be okay. Directors, kids, I don't know about you guys, when I was a kid, I didn't make the best decisions. I didn't know things that my parents knew, no matter how much I thought I knew better, I didn't. I didn't have this unforeseen knowledge that my parents couldn't understand. And I like to believe I didn't go through the phase where I knew better than everything they did, but I'm sure I did. I'm sure my dad will tell me after he listens to the sermon that I did, and that's okay. But we go through kind of a defiant stage as kids. And sometimes I feel like, sometimes it's, I'm going to allow you to stay there or we're going to push you through it. I was one of those weird kids that if my dad said, hey, don't do this because this is the experience that I had, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that too. Or then there's other times, well, I can do it better. Right? You've never thought that though, guys, right? Your parents say not to do something, well, I can do it better. I won't get in trouble with that. But we have to teach kids, and this is from someone who doesn't have a kid, but I will say I was a youth pastor for many years, which is a lot like being a parent sometimes, because some of the kids that you're ministering to in youth group and in children's church and all of those areas don't have influences at home. But it's our job and our duty to teach them right from wrong. It's our job and our duty to teach them of the sinful nature that we're all born with, and that we would choose to do the wrong thing if it were up to us solely. If you knew that you found $1,000 on the ground and you could pick it up and no one would miss it, you'd keep it, right? Anybody? Who would not keep the $1,000 if no one would miss it? A few? There we go. We got a few. But if you didn't know Jesus, would you? That might be the question to ask beyond that. Who taught you that you should return to others? There was a story I heard on the radio about I want to say it was an 8-year-old kid found a $100 bill on the ground at Walmart and turned it into the what do we call it, the customer service that said, hey, I found this. So they made an announcement, did anyone lose their money, basically kind of thing. Well, it turned out that the $100 was lost by a 80-something-year-old man who was on a fixed income, and that $100 meant a lot. And the guy, it's like, the kid, basically the mom's like, well, the kid, I didn't have to tell him to do it. He just wanted to do the right thing. Said, it's not mine, I want to return it. The $100 to someone that's on a fixed income is a huge deal. And the guy that, he's like, yeah, when I lost $100, and me and Kristen have done something similar. We found $100 and returned it before, but, it's not mine to keep. It wasn't his to keep, and he knew that. But I'm willing to bet you someone taught that kid the difference between right and wrong and keeping and not keeping and all of those things. But we can know that. The second thing that I want us to know from this scripture specifically is we're talking about spending time with family and the influence that we have on our family as we go forward, and just recognizing that our influence is, everything to do forever that we have is with our kids. You can impact the family forever. That's kids, parents, everybody. It's the whole family. The second thing that we have to know is that the perceptions that we have of God are usually based upon our own perceptions of our fathers. As I was preparing for this week, and I spent a little more time reading through research and understanding, because again, I don't have kids, and preaching to people that have kids about what you should do with your kids is kind of like telling people that you're not married, but this is how you should act when you're married. It's kind of one of those awkward places to be, but I felt like it's something we should talk about, is that the way that our fathers are, and everyone I've talked to, and research shows the same thing, that however you view your dad as your initial view of God. If you view your dad as someone who's distant, far away, not connected, not involved in your life in any shape or way, that's your immediate understanding of God. And it's, if you think of one dad to the other, that's what you know, that's what you've experienced. If you view your dad as someone who's involved, someone who's caring, someone who does everything they can do, that's your immediate understanding of God. That's before you're trained, that's before you're taught, that's before you've read the Bible and see the things that God does. But also, that's where you find yourself going back to. That's your neutral ground. Like you're struggling, the way you view God in your struggle is usually your gut feeling of God. And that's impacted by your father. So one thing that says is that as fathers, we have a responsibility to be there, be present, be involved. But the other thing that shows me is that sometimes when we're thinking of God in a specific way, it's because that's the way that we've been taught. That's the way that we've understood. Because of the relationship I have with my dad, that we're close. Like I said, we talk to each other a few times a week still. If he still lived here in the state, we would see each other at least once a week, even if he lived an hour away or more. We would still see each other on a regular basis. And I knew as a kid that if something was wrong, Dad would fix it. If something, I got hurt, Mom and Dad would take care of it, this was going to happen, it was going to be okay. But I have friends and close friends that don't have that same understanding, that don't have that same relationship. And it's hard for us. Because it's hard to understand what someone else's feelings about God are when we don't understand where they've come from. If you yourself have a distant father, it's hard to think of God as being the dad that's going to care. Because in the Bible it says that God is our Father. I pray, our Father in heaven, that's the prayer we talked about, that Jesus teaches us to pray, our Father who art in heaven. But do we allow God to really shape himself, or do we put our preconceived ideas, our perceptions of who God is, on him because of what our parents have done? Whether good, whether bad. The thing that we are often really good about is judging people by their actions instead of by their intentions. They did this. Well, they were trying to do this, but this is what they did. They're terrible people because they did this. Our greatest place of influence will be here. As men, if you have kids, your greatest place of influence is with them, and it's with your perception of fathers. As mothers, your greatest position of influence is with your kids and with your siblings and with those around you, because that's how you're viewed. That nurturing, that loving, or is it that person you can't go to, the person you can't talk to? I think as we go on vacations, I think vacations are that time of the year that we think that we can have a redo, right? I haven't been very good the rest of the year. I haven't been involved. I haven't been listening. I haven't been paying attention. And I'm going to try to make up for it all in this 1 week. But what do we do when we come back? That's the thing that matters most. The vacations are good. It's great to get away. I personally love vacations. I'd rather do that than work. I don't know about the rest of you. I love them. But if we go on our vacation and say, we're going to spend all this time together, then as soon as we come back, we go back to the old habits, the old way of, I don't have my phone on me, it's up there, but most of us don't get more than a few feet from our phones at any given time. You ever gone through a parking lot and you see the parents standing on their cell phone and their toddlers running around the parking lot in front of cars and stuff like that? Are you ever that parent? Or are you that grandparent, you're walking there, and I remember as a kid, you don't go anywhere without holding mom or dad's hand. That was or sister's hand. Mom or dad's hand, if you're going to walk across in front of cars, you're holding their hand. That's the way things happen in public. But what we do, how we allow ourselves to focus, and the example we allow ourselves to be, is seen by the people around us. It's seen by those that we know, the strangers, the people around us, and that's how God can use us to influence those. Because the way that my dad treated me is the way that I can influence others that are around me and see, this is what I know and this is what I can expect. And maybe your relationship with your dad's the opposite, like my dad with his dad. Maybe your relationship was the complete opposite. And it's like, I don't want to be anything like that. And that allows that to be a place of influence that we have. And as we close, and I know this is a different type of message, and this will be a different type of series, I ask that everyone will stand with me. And I just want it to be clear and everyone to know that God is not a dad who is distant. He's not one that says, I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to look down and I'm going to let you make your own mistakes and your own failures, and I'm just going to let you stay there and wallow in it and fix it. If he were, I'd be in trouble. I'd be in a lot of problems. But God is the dad who wants to come down, who wants to help, who wants to be present, and wants you to bring your problems and your issues and your trials before him. He's involved. If your perception of God is not clear, if you look through the Bible, you can see that God sent his only son to come to earth, to die for our sins, so we can have the same life that he has, so we can be co-heirs. It's what Jesus actually calls us. We are his brothers, we are his sisters. We share in that inheritance that he had. That's who God is and the example that God has there for us.